Hi everybody, it's Pete Werner from the Diz Unplugged here at the beautiful Disneyland Hotel, joined by the host of our Disneyland podcast, Tom Bell, and artist Dave Avanzino, whose work can be found at both Disneyland and Walt Disney World. Thank you very much for being with us, Dave.
Thanks for having me.
As we were talking before, I was telling you that I've been a fan of your work for a number of years. Your shadow boxes, these beautiful sculpted shadow boxes that I first found out here. The Haunted Mansion one was the first one I purchased. I purchased many since then. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background in art to begin with, before we get into that stuff?
Sure. I probably took my first formal art class when I was 21. Because I had always done art as a kid, and interestingly kind of made things that were similar to the shadow boxes I make now, where I would go into a shop and see some kind of a knick-knack, and I would go home and make it. I drew a lot, but that wasn't my strong suit. And then just was very, very fortunate years ago to go to a picture framer to frame my other dimensional pieces, and they happen to be the framer that does a lot of work for Disney. And they have become good friends, and I would be in there framing something, and if somebody from Disney was there, they would just say, "Hey, have you seen Dave's work? Do you know Dave?" And a couple people started using me for little things, like somebody's name that was maybe on a bigger gift piece. So it was a little tiny piece of my art, big piece of somebody else's art. So for a while, just mostly did the special events, the ticketed after-hours events that they used to do a lot of, and then eventually had a buyer that said, "Why don't you just make something to sell in the park?" We're like, okay, a little more steady. So I started making the paper sculpture, limited editions for the park. And when the 50th rolled around, they said, what do you want to do for the 50th? And so I had handmade the lands of the park, Disney Fantasyland, Frontierland, Adventureland, for the last Disneyana convention that was here at the Disneyland Hotel. It was the second to last actual Disneyana, but it was the last one they had here. So I thought of that series and would kind of kicked myself because I thought, that was the bet. That would have been great for the 50th. Like, why did I sort of, use that already? But what we decided to do was to try and find a way to mass produce that. And that really came about as a result of that Disneyland's 50th anniversary. So it became more of a sculpted thing, which I always tell people I was not a sculptor. I had no intent of sculpting, never studied sculpting, but I sort of had to learn how, because the first pieces I sent over were still maybe made out of paper or cardstock. They didn't make a very good mold, right? Because the moisture kind of didn't do well with that medium. So I really switched to kind of working with clay, which I have totally enjoyed now. And once we had kind of solved how to translate my art that way, it opened the door to kind of, starting moving to the attractions and Pirates of the Caribbean and Haunted Mansion, things like that. And what's interesting is I just got my first pictures back of a piece that almost goes back to sort of the original piece I did that had words in it. Mm-hmm. So it's the phrase, "When you wish upon a star." And it has a little bit more of a look of my older paper sculpture. So kind of trying something else. Mm-hmm. It's like if we can solve that kind of opens the door to doing a lot more with words and phrases from the films and things like that. So I'm excited to see how that comes out.
Now, talking about like, I hesitate to use the phrase average piece because none of your pieces are average.
Thank you.
But how long does it take you to put one of these things together?
It's hard to say. It's like, I always think people probably, if I was really honest, they'd say you can do it that fast, because it's probably 2 to 3 weeks.
Wow.
From beginning to end. But that's from the time I started actually painting it. Months before that, I'm concepting it out.
Right.
And so there's a lot of time in the concept. Most of the time my concepts are approved pretty easily. I mean, every now and then there's, change this. That was a hard one because it didn't exist yet. Like doing a Cars Land piece, there was nowhere to go and take pictures of. So I was totally dependent on the concept art. And as I was telling you earlier, was fortunate on a trip back there literally about a week before I came home and painted, I actually got to go touring with an Imagineer. So I was able to actually take some of my own pictures to use. So I come home and, I use Photoshop a lot to size, I'll take a picture and I'll crop it in Photoshop and I'll kind of lay everything out where I want to get it the size I want. And then I don't paint one big painting and then cut it apart. I actually paint each piece separately because of the overlap. You don't want to just repeat an image and see a different thing behind. I want this thing to go way behind there and not be able to see as you physically move around the object. So, it could be, and I always paint them a little larger than the edition size will be, because when I frame the original, I want it to be 25% larger, so that it has a distinctive, something different than just framing it. It's sitting next to the edition, and one is 10 times as much. I want it to actually have a little bit more size to it, and so it kind of depends on the piece. But that one was a really extensive painting.
I am stunned that a couple of weeks, for somebody.
I almost hate to say, because sometimes people think that would take you 3 years.
I was just going to say, without the gift, I mean, because I can't draw stick figures, so I get, I have no ability in that area.
But the thing that has always been and will always be the nicest thing about it is that I get to make something that somebody else loves and wants in their house.
Exactly.
Because I think that's pretty rare.
Yeah.
Like, proportionally of people in the world, like the small group of us that gets to make something that makes other people happy, and that they want, they like. People always say, "Do you have a hard time letting it go?" I'm like, no, because chances are somebody's going to love it more than I do. Like, I like it, and there are a few pieces I have in my house that I love this piece. I want a copy of this hanging up in my house. Most of the time, I don't. I mean, I like it. I like the piece, but I'm not as passionate about it. But I love the fact that somebody else is going to love that piece more than I do.
So what are some of the pieces you've created that you feel that way about?
The one at my house is a Pinocchio. And I'm not like a huge Pinocchio fan or anything, but I wound up doing, it's kind of a shot through the window. The mat of the piece is actually the window of the store. So it's all hand cut, kind of like the fancy one, like the glass panes and everything. And then it's looking at that bench that kind of goes back into the frame. So all the shelves are sort of angled, and then each one of the toys was all separate. And then what I did is I actually took that sort of Italian-looking doll out and actually painted Pinocchio to fit in that spot, and then put a little Jiminy Cricket as like the hobo Jiminy, kind of off to the side, peeking around. And then on the top shelf, you have to actually be looking in the piece to see I did like a retro Mickey, like based on a reproduction doll that I had, like one of those ones from the 20s or something.
Right.
So it was just like the real. It was the cloth dolls that somebody made, and then some years ago somebody reissued like a version of those, which I really like.
Right.
And so I kind of painted Mickey sort of sitting up, but you do not see. It's not like anything you see when you look, and you kind of got to look through one of the holes in the necklace and see what. But there just was this richness to it, and the detail, and I was like, that's a lot of times with my APs, my artist proofs, I don't frame them anymore because they just sit somewhere. So I'll just kind of box it up really nice, and someday I know I can go back, I can put a frame on it, hang it up. But that one, I was like, that one I want in my house, because it just is, to me, it's just one of the favorite pieces I painted. I love the composition. I just love the look of all the toys. And
now, you had mentioned that you started as a kid. You were an artist.
Crafty.
What do you tell parents who have children that are starting to show some promise in art?
I just let them do it. Like find what it is they love and let them do it. I mean, it's not an easy business. I'm really, really fortunate in that I work for myself. And I think that's one of the hardest things to do. There's a lot of jobs in art out there, but I think it's hard to sort of do it yourself. I'm very blessed, and that adage that it's all who you know, completely true. I mean, I would not be doing what I'm doing today if it was not for people that I met along the way that introduced me here and introduced me there. I would not be doing this. So it's and for the people doing it, it's trying hard, and it's finding your style, and I think that's one of the things you talked about that is I appreciate or I like about what I do or what I see when I go into my work in the gallery is that it's like a different medium. It's not something that anybody else is doing, so that's a plus because it's different. So I think people need to find their own style and just run with that, and hopefully somebody's going to want it in their house. And
you were in the parks recently.
Yes.
You have a new Peter Pan piece?
Yeah, there's a new Peter Pan limited edition that was actually something I designed about 5 years ago, and for another anniversary, and I don't remember the reasons, but we wound up going with the Tinkerbell limited edition. And so, kind of like Imagineering, you always hear those stories about how nothing ever goes away. It's like right in the drawer, and you wait long enough, and hey, Peter Pan's back. So, and I had always I'm so glad I got to do it because I really like the design, and I love pulling phrases and lines of dialogue from the movies, and that was just one I was kind of disappointed I had never made. So it was fun to actually get to make it. So
when you do some of your appearances at Disney, one of the things people can get are custom shadow boxes made by Dave using some of these different.
They're all based. It is a Disneyland based series. I do sell it at Disney World occasionally, and I was able to get 3 whole Disney World letters in that actually have Disney World written on them. So if you have an S, an O, or a Y in your name, you're good to go. But the one option is I do have, like, the background of the Disneyland ones has all the names of the lands. So there is a Magic Kingdom option background, so people can have that too. But most of the attractions kind of tie it. So they're all based on attractions and lands. Kind of came out of that 50th anniversary series, but obviously had to come up with a lot more to fill it in. So each letter has about at least 5 and up to 8 or 9 choices. And I'm actually in the process of hopefully expanding that. There's 2 complete alphabets. There's a Haunted Mansion alphabet and a Pirate alphabet. Because I figured those are the 2 attractions almost everybody's going to know.
Right.
And if I had like 1 or 2 pirate letters, that were not, and it wasn't in their name, I thought that's not going to go over well. And same with Mansion. So there's a whole alphabet. We have any letter in those. And I've had several people use all Haunted Mansion letters. The same, because they're all similar, but and then they take a couple other elements that I have as letters, but it's like a clock or the oval with the Haunted Mansion, and they kind of put them on the side and made their own Haunted Mansion piece.
Wow.
So that's been kind of cool. But I mean, almost everybody picks one or both of those alphabets, and I'm hoping to add like a castle alphabet, not quite princessy, but a little more princessy than some of the other things I have.
And I want to make sure people understand these are not available for direct order.
No.
You have to come see you. They have to come see you at one of your appearances.
And they are all handmade by me. I mean, if there's letters I'm sculpting out of clay every time. I have 2 molds, Matterhorn and Thunder Mountain. And what I love is they're the same 2 molds I made from the very first handmade limited edition to the molds I used for the open edition that are in the Disneyland one. They are the exact same mold. So there really is kind of this tie-in all the way back to the beginning. So back when my sculpting was not at its peak, but they're okay. There's a few things I look at and kind of think, "Ooh, I could have done that better."
Well, you can also make sure you check out Dave's Facebook page.
Yes.
We'll make sure we put a link to that in the show notes page, disunplugged.com. Dave, thanks so much for coming out and chatting with us, and thank you for what you create. I absolutely love your work, and the highest praise I can give you is all over my house.
I have one shout out.
Please.
I want to thank Anthony Marco, who is the one that told me to look at your site, because he said, "Hey, I watched their show and your art was in the back," and I hadn't noticed it until then. So and then that's how it all got rolling. So
awesome.
Give him a shout.
Awesome. Well, good. Thanks very much, Dave.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
Really appreciate it. Great to meet you guys in person.
Thanks. That'll do it for this segment. Thanks for joining us. Take care.